To the thing, man. It's back to the grindstone. It's back to the reality. It's back to what forms and what shapes. We talk about the grindstone not because it has some complementary exemplary notion to what is put into practice when it comes to work. As such, it is shorthand for work, back to work. But the grindstone is the sharpening stone. The grindstone is the stone that sharpens the tool. The grindstone is the stone that places you in the context of becoming something more adept, more adroit, more nimble, and facile within the context of an achievement. So the grindstone is not per se some form of preparation, although in the sense of saying that it is that. And this is really what it is. Okay, we say back to the grindstone, back to work. I'm back to preparing myself for what I will encounter. I'm back to preparing myself for what will come forth. And so that's what the grindstone is actually. That's what the grindstone is. It is that which prepares you for what's coming. But we talk about the grindstone as work. Well, what are we preparing for? Ultimately, our communion with God, our death, our removal from this planet and this existence. And the grindstone is the thing that prepares us for it. It's a very almost a Puritan. You kind of start to understand the emphasis of work within the emphasis on work within the context of Protestant religions. I think people miss that because it's so inherent in Anglo culture and American culture, which leaks into global culture. But that concept, the concept of what work is, it's a concept of the earthly realm as a preparatory realm. It's the concept of the inhabitation of life on this planet as a staging ground for what is actually to come, the kingdom of God in its effervescence. Now, we participate in this through the giving of ourselves to something that has its embodiment in the earthly toil, in the earthly struggle. You could put it in the context of tilling a field or preparing, however you want to put that into like making money, putting food on the table. All of this is, yes, it is work. It is something to gather resources to provide for those who rely on you. But it's not just that, because if it was just that, you wouldn't be saying back to the grindstone. The grindstone is an almost obscure. I guess that a lot of farmers would use a grindstone and have a grindstone so that they could sharpen their agricultural implements, their rudimentary tools for tilling and various implements for farming, right? So everybody it would be shorthand for work for many people. But they could say back to the plow, and that would make just as much sense. But if that's how you're taking it, you're not understanding the religious context and the societal and cultural, spiritual context in which that was formed. The grindstone is shorthand for this earth. Work in the context of the Protestant and the Puritan and those corners of Reformation spiritual thought. Work is essentially a shorthand for life on this planet. And work as a shorthand for life on this planet is actually shorthand for the preparation of yourself for God's kingdom, for the afterlife. It's a notion of literally life as work and work as preparation, eternal preparation. Actually, there's kind of there's a bit of a doomsday cult-ish nature. You can see how some of these late 20th century California cults grew out of. California was a heavily, the Anglo parts of California were heavily Protestant, especially in places like Southern California. When you had you had a lot of Catholics there up to the early 20th century, but you had people moving from the West Coast, and especially the Mormon influence. A lot of the Southwest has a very pure. It's not puritanical in the sense of being overtly religious, but it views life on Earth in some of the same outpourings or outshoots of those 17th century ideations. And so we're talking now. It's fascinating because that's a 300-year downstream relation of. Okay, you talk about a farmer in the Netherlands conceiving of reality, his reality as an eternal preparation for what will come. And when people say you live by your works are what work means is a preparation. You're preparing the vessel, and it's an ancient idea. This is an ancient idea. The Egyptians, I don't know about the Sumerians, but like the Mayans, everyone had this idea that this realm is essentially a staging ground for what will come. That's not new, but the emphasis on it's not a cloistered intellectualism. That's kind of one of the differences, and you can see this in modern everywhere in modern culture. I mean, capitalism itself is almost predicated on there's like this emphasis not on an ideological rumination in the way Catholicism became in the West. I can't speak to the East as much, but there is a particular emphasis on how you engage with this lifetime, and not necessarily in a moral sense. And I think that's where you can see a lot of deviation. I mean, atheism came out of the Protestant movements. That the morality almost became less, and you have to understand at the same time the absolute branching off of the religion led to many different forms. So you cannot characterize this in any way simply, but it really it's the focus on this lifetime, and the concept of work, not as work as you would think, although some people will try to put it in that context. There's also an adjacent Jewish context, a Semitic context of the way of relating to life on this earth that melds in with European thought. It's a more prudent engagement with the auspices and trappings of this earth as is, not necessarily even considering alternatives. So you mix the prudence of European Jewry with the Protestant, the Anglo-Germanic Protestants of the 17th century, and you get this strange individualism that is reverent. It's reverent, but it machinates within the context of the confines of the earth, but with an ideological overbearing of there is, and again at that time. And now, again, you see many offshoots, which again turn into like a doomsday cult. It turns into a doomsday cult because people want to find God in their bank account because they worship their effort. That's the problem with this, that you end up worshiping your own effort, because you're mixing an idea of work not as preparation. You're back to the grindstone. I'm back to preparing myself for the afterlife. No. People lost that. People took on an idea of I am engaging in a calculated motion to some goal within this life. I'm not toiling to prepare for meeting with God as duty. My duty is preparing for meeting with God as an enterprise is that struggle. That's the Protestant ethic. The Catholic ethic is I'm preparing for meeting with God by convening with him on a spiritual level in this lifetime, not by work, by prayer, by a contact with it, which is almost a more shamanistic, and it's older, so that makes more sense. It's closer to the root of it, but it has there's a less prudent element. It's not the absolute outpouring of innovation and technological and financial and economic growth that's not a Catholic thing. It's not valued within the Catholic Church. I mean, authoritarian economic systems, which naturally convene themselves along the lines of aristocratic power, that's something that transcends religion in its form. That you see that today. with a secular society, or whichever was secular, non-secular, I never can remember. And I don't really care. But it's just, people forget what that was about. It's back to the grindstone. Yeah, the grindstone, it's shorthand for work, but work is shorthand for preparing yourself for the next life. And people, I think some people see it like that incidentally, but a lot of people see work as a preparation for getting something in this life, which is very different. It's very different than a Dutch farmer would have seen, than a Puritan farmer, than a Pennsylvania peasant would have seen things in 1650, in 1700. They wouldn't understand your obsession with this life. They would not understand it. They would understand your obsession with work, but the reasons, the rationale, why they do it, it's all for preparing to meet with God. And people today don't care about that at all. They don't even believe in it. And that's, or they believe in it so wholeheartedly that they join a doomsday cult. And that's kind of what happened.